Fala galera, InsurCast na área, começando aqui mais um episódio. Eu, Rafael Bruno.
E Rodrigo Arasaki.
Hoje um episódio diferente, pessoal. Já vou avisando, a gente não é nativo, já vão nos perdoando os erros. Quer xingar a gente porque a gente falou errado? Comenta aí que vai dar...
Deixa nos comentários se a gente falou inglês errado ou não,
Isso.
Porque isso dá engajamento no YouTube também.
Hoje a gente tá chique, pessoal. Estamos recebendo aqui um convidado dos Estados Unidos. Hoje a entrevista vai ser em inglês. Espero que vocês possam aproveitar o conteúdo e ligar um pouco menos às nossas pronúncias, né, Japinha?
Exato. Eu acho que é importante a gente poder falar com pessoas de várias regiões, de vários assuntos, várias áreas.
Diferentes, né?
Pessoas diferentes e trazer, inclusive, a visão de fora, né? Para dentro aqui, como que é feito, como as pessoas enxergam, como é trabalhado, né? Algumas questões. Espero que vocês gostem do conteúdo. Não deixe de se inscrever no canal, deixar aquele like, se inscrever, compartilhar com os amiguinhos. Que mais, Rafa? No nosso canal também do InsurCortes, também tá lá. Não deixe de se inscrever, compartilhar. E é isso, o que mais?
Não, e agradecer demais a Fran que conseguiu essa agenda aqui pra gente. Ela que fez todo o meio campo,
ponte
né,
aí.
Japa?
Exato.
É isso aí. Sem mais delongas, apresentando aqui o William Porter, da Swiss Re Corporate Solutions.
Yes.
Corso.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
Yes. E como de costume, pessoal, a gente vai ter os nossos patrocinadores agora, rodando o vídeo aí na tela para vocês.
Active in the loss prevention market for over a decade, the MV Group is recognized by its excellency in consulting services for operations throughout the entire logistics chain. The MV Group grew 170% in the last 3 years and currently counts with a team of 120 employees conducting operations in 5 countries for companies such as General Motors, Samsung, Toyota, Tokyo Marine, and Honda. In 2017, the MV Group expanded to the United States and founded the MV Risk Modeling Solutions. The California-based company is in charge of the group operations in North America. Our products: MV Engineering, inspections and audit services in companies, residencies, buildings, and constructions. MV Insurance, claims analysis and loss preventions due to theft, breakdowns, and accidents. MV Software, development of customized software systems designed to fulfill customer needs with cutting-edge technology. MV Audit, with a focus in the cargo transportation segment, the MV Group is widely recognized for its excellency in audit services for insurance processes and procedures. MV Assist, assistance with inspection services at the loading and unloading of high-value products in ports and airports. MV Infrastructure, the MV Group develops exclusive risk management projects for the most important transportation infrastructure segments. MV Consulting, the MV Group provides consulting services throughout the entire logistics chain and for customers such as insurance companies, insurance brokers, risk management firms, shippers, carriers, logistics operators, manufacturers, automakers, and technology companies. MV Cargo and Vehicle Recovery, using technology resources, we're able to locate and recover cargo and vehicles in case of theft. MV Rental, the MV Rental counts with the latest top security equipment, including security cameras, drones, taser glasses, tablets, and mobile phones, specially adapted to assist in the execution of loss prevention projects. MV, security and innovation throughout the entire logistics chain.
A logística movimenta o mundo. Cada vez mais, a tecnologia e a integração de dados trazem praticidade e mais agilidade para o dia a dia. A plataforma NS Tech nasceu da dor de profissionais da área que precisam integrar informações e diversos sistemas diferentes para viabilizar a sua operação logística. Integração, soluções, eficiência e economia. são as palavras-chave para oferecer centenas de soluções conectadas. O mercado terá acesso a um portal com informações completas sobre tudo que está inserido na plataforma e um ambiente integrado e de fácil acesso. Com o conceito One Stop Shop ativado, a plataforma se consolida como o maior portfólio de produtos e serviços da América Latina. Centenas de soluções conectadas na maior plataforma Open Logistics do mundo. Obtenha dados, gerencie operações, venda ou compre produtos, organize informações, encontre soluções. Esta é a primeira etapa. Estamos apenas começando. A sua empresa faz parte do ecossistema logístico? NS Tech.
We are a company of the N-Stech Group, leader in the Brazilian market in risk management systems for cargo transportation. We are located in Mexico City, where we have been operating since 2019, offering our services with more than 250 employees committed to preemptively mitigate the significant impact of damage generated by crime on your property. We provide risk management and logistics solutions to companies of all sizes. Our services safeguard corporate assets and mitigate exposure to risk. Risk assessment consulting. Background check. Monitoring center and control tower. Risk management and logistics information systems. Accident prevention systems. Platform integration, WMS and TMS. Operational BICE. Evolutionary consulting on tracking technologies. Remote custody. Active CCTV image monitoring. Immediate reaction group. Implementation of devices for asset recovery. Location and recovery of assets. We understand the importance of protecting your business and its assets. Let us help you address your risks head-on.
E, recebendo aqui agora, não menos importante que os patrocinadores que passaram aí.
Exato.
A nossa parceria com a editora Roncarate, que está sempre conosco aqui. O livro Seguro Patrimonial, Grandes Riscos, Princípios Básicos, de Hermes Brancaleão. Irmão, muito obrigado aí. E vamos que vamos.
Vamos que vamos.
William, as I said, I'm very glad you are here, you know. If you can, please introduce yourself for our audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. So, William Porter, I'm the head of international programs for the Americas at Swiss Re Corporate Solutions. The Americas to us means North America and South America. All of the business that is international that we either produce or receive into those two regions, I ultimately have responsibility for making sure it works as smoothly as it can, and that all of the teams that we have in place to serve our customers in this space are working together and delivering the service that we promise when we bind these deals.
Good. And I'm very curious because, you know, here in Brazil, we always say that we go by chance to the insurance market. On the other hand, we always heard that, you know, insurance in USA is in their culture, you know, in your culture. How was it for you? How you enter in this market?
So I've got to say there's a lot in the U.S. that you just fall into it as well. And I was the same. I was working in banking when I got out of school. I got a call from a recruiter from Zurich Insurance. She asked me, what do I know about insurance? I said nothing. She said, you'll fit right in. So why don't you come for an interview? So I did. After 3 years of working in the bank, I joined Zurich as a underwriting assistant in the property space, and worked my way up through the underwriting ranks there. I got into the international space kind of the same way I got into insurance in general. when about 3 months after I started working there, we decided that we were going to form an international team in Atlanta, Georgia, where I was working at the time. And they asked the UAs for volunteers, who wants to do international? And I was the only one that raised my hand. Everybody else was scared of it, I guess. But that's how I got the international side of things started. So yeah, definitely fell into it. It's like that across a lot of the U.S., I think. We're starting to see some change. There's a lot of universities now that have insurance degrees, and we're getting kids coming out of those schools that are applying for our entry-level jobs. So it's kind of interesting to see a little bit of a shift, but if you still talk to a lot of people, especially those of us who have been in the industry for a couple decades now, a lot of people fell into it by chance.
And William, what's your opinion about the Americans consume a lot of insurance? Is because of the net cat country? Is because of the why so have a lot of demand of the insurance there?
So I think you hit on a big part of it with the nat cat. Certainly in the property and related lines of business. The nat cat exposures of every kind you're going to find in the U.S. You have earthquakes, you have hurricanes, you have hail, you have tornadoes. Whatever can go wrong with the weather, there's somewhere in the U.S. that it's going to go wrong. So that eats up a lot of capacity. And we're seeing more, and we do a lot of work with companies about what limits do you need and how does this need to look. Companies want to know that they're protected, both for their customers and their shareholders. And we really see that. We know that it's a good service that the insurance industry can provide, so that when these things do happen, we get the customers back on their feet and producing or doing whatever it is that they do so that they can work with their customers down the road. So that, I think, is a big piece, certainly on the property side, which is where my background is. Yeah. These days, overseeing all the lines of business, at least from the international side, I see a bit more. And I think if you look to the casualty lines or the FinPro lines, you look at the unfortunate culture that exists in the U.S. With all the litigation that's out there. Companies have to be protected from that, because if something happens on their premises, they're going to be sued by somebody. And typically in the U.S., the legal system looks for the people with the deepest pockets, and those typically are going to be our corporate insureds. So they have to make sure that they're protected. So there's a lot of capacity that gets tied up from that as well.
Yeah, interesting, because when we compare the countries here, of course, in Brazil and America, here we have another problems. It's not just only nat cat now. I don't know, but we are seeing a lot of problems involving nature. But we have here, for example, a lot of kind of theft. Theft robbery.
Right.
It's not the case in the USA, or you have some problems or claims or
it's usually not the case where you're going to see a robbery claim breach a deductible. Again, for the type of customers that I work with and that Corso works with on the corporate side, in the states themselves. But given that I work with customers with international exposures, there's certainly parts around the world where that's a bigger concern. And we have to look at the limits. That's part of the risk engineering approach that we take while we're working with customers, is understanding where is their product stored, how is it shipped from place to place, what kind of protection is in place to hopefully mitigate those losses. But it's unfortunately definitely an exposure that we see.
How is it there? Because sometimes one problem that we have here is we do a lot of recommendations, and they just okay, thank you. And they just go on, How is it there?
I would say it's the same.
Really?
There's a lot of similarities. What we really try to do, though, is you can provide recommendation after recommendation after recommendation. I think the key to it is having that dialogue with the customer about the importance of the recommendations. Something that I've seen done that works pretty well is ranking them. These are the important ones. These are the ones that really have to be done. So if you have that conversation with a risk manager and show them the ones that are truly critical recommendations, and we've even gone so far at times as to break down the cost to fulfill the recommendation, to complete what we're asking them to do, and how much it might save them in a loss scenario, and sometimes how much it might save them in a premium. So we can show the modeling works out like this. If you make this change, then you could save on the premium, and you'll definitely save in a loss scenario. And that's something that I think helps customers really grasp that we're not just putting out recommendations because we want to see everything perfect. That's not what it is. We're trying to help them mitigate their risk, and I think if they realize that you're trying to partner with them rather than just dictating what you say they have to do, that you're going to have customers who are much more interested working with you. Because I think risk managers are in the role that they're in because they care about their companies, they care about their people, they want to do the right thing. They just have to have a partner that's willing to talk with them and explain how from our side, from the carrier side, it's actually going to have an impact.
Yeah. And you are in charge of international program, right?
Right.
Can you explain a little bit for us how it works? Why is it important?
And how differs the traditional insurance and the global program?
Sure. So the key, I'll start with the second part of the question. The key difference is it allows a customer, typically it's going to be the risk manager, to negotiate their insurance by line of business just one time. So they work with an underwriter and a broker in their home country. So we're here in Sao Paulo. We have a customer in Brazil that's interested in an international program. They come to our underwriters at Corso. They work with them. The entire risk globally is underwritten by that single underwriter. That gives the customer the freedom to only have to negotiate their insurance purchasing once. The alternative to that would be take however many countries they have exposure in where they need to have coverage in place. They would have to then coordinate buying individual local policies in all of those countries. That takes a lot of time and resources that the risk managers of today, with everything they're being asked to do, they often don't have. So it helps them to coordinate their program, only have to do things once. It gives a lot of control over the risk management program of the entire company, because every country, every exposure that company has, they know that ultimately it's their corporate risk manager in the home country that's making the decisions, that's dealing with the insurance companies and representing the company as an entirety to the world and to the carriers that are providing the capacity for them. And the way that we make this work, to your question, is we do all the underwriting in the home country. There'll be what's called a master policy issued in that country. That's going to have worldwide coverage where it's permissible. But then we'll also work with our offices around the world. So the Corso offices that we have around the world, or partners in countries where we don't have our own offices. And we'll have what we call local policies issued for that company. So they have coverage in place in that local country, but they don't have to negotiate it themselves. It's already been pre-negotiated by the master. We take that administrative burden on of getting that policy issued, have the limits that we've agreed to, and all of the risk then is ceded back to the home country. And that's the other key part of it from the carrier side. It's you're not dealing with 50 carriers around the world. If you have that many countries, you're still dealing with one, because everything is going to be reinsured back to the home country. And that means that it's a coordinated and controlled program from the carrier's viewpoint as well. So it benefits not just the customer, but it can benefit the carrier.
Sometimes I think you may have some coverage, difference between countries.
Yes.
Is it covered by the master policy? I have heard about some clause GIC-GIL. I don't know if is it right. Is it possible?
It is, and you're exactly right. DIC-DIL stands for difference in conditions, difference in limits. So it's either of those two things. If the local policy is not as broad as your master policy, and you have a loss locally that for whatever reason is not covered, what we do is when there is a claim that happens on a local policy, we'll simultaneously open a claim on the master, and we'll adjust the claim as if it occurred on the master policy. So we can see if there's a differential between the policy language, whether it's purely a limit. If they have a $5 million limit for something on a local policy, but it's 50 on the master, they'll get that extra there. Or if it's a coverage that's not offered on the local policy, whether it's by regulation or just the breadth of the policy itself. What we want to do is, I talked earlier about the single underwriting of the risk and the single negotiation. We want the customer to know that what they've negotiated in their home country, that's the coverage they're ultimately going to get. And we'd like to have it on the local policy. We strive to do that. Some of our innovations that we've made really have eliminated a lot of the DIC, DIL because we issue essentially the same policy wording in most of our countries. So that helps to eliminate that. But the idea is that we want the customers to have the coverage that they've negotiated on the master policy. So DIC, DIL is one way that works. There's a somewhat new concept as well. I say new, it's probably 10 years old at this point, called financial interest coverage. Because what you find is a lot of countries around the world, they don't allow DIC, DIL. So if there's a claim that's not covered by their policy, it can go back to the master, but they won't allow a claims payment to come back into their country. Or if they do allow it, they tax it. As a capital expenditure from that company, so it gets heavily taxed, much more so than an insurance payment would. So financial interest gives us a mechanism to look at that claim, adjust it on the master policy, and the name financial interest comes from the fact that what we look to do is say the parent company that we're insuring on that master policy, they have a financial interest in a loss that happened somewhere around the world that we can't make a payment to them for. So what we're doing is we're paying for that loss to their balance sheet as a parent company. They then get paid in their home country for that claim. At that point, they can decide for themselves what they want to do with those funds. They can repatriate them to the country of the original loss. They can keep them themselves. They can do whatever makes the most sense for them. But it's a way for carriers to be able to fulfill that promise of providing the coverage that we've bound with them.
Yeah. On the other hand, I believe, I don't know, that sometimes, for example, we have this currency problem, dollar and real, for example, in our case, and the deductible comes
inflation
with dollar, do you receive a lot of complaints or try different negotiation in different countries? Is it possible?
So there's a few things that we try to do. It's interesting when you get complaints because, of course, you only get them when the exchange rates go one way. If they go the other, nobody complains.
Yeah, that's true.
And what we tend to find is, absent extraordinary circumstances, if a government officially devalues its currency or something, then, of course, that's a different issue. There is coverage available for things like that. If it's just normal exchange rate fluctuations, we tend to see them balance out, where the positives are going to outweigh or balance with the negatives around the world. One thing that we do try to do to mitigate that is move the money as quickly as possible. So typically the biggest time that money is moving is when the customer is paying their premium. Of course, if there's a claim, but there's a lot of factors that go into adjusting a claim and the timing of which that's paid. So what we try to do, though, is get the invoice issued as soon after the binding date as we can, and then hopefully work with the customer to have them pay that invoice as quickly as possible as well. That way we're going to minimize the risk of those large exchange rate fluctuations. While, yes, the rates can change within as little as a week, but if you look at it historically, if we get things moved within 45 days or so of the time that we have all the last information to do it, there's not going to be a lot of movement in that exchange rate, and that tends to make everybody a lot happier. The other thing that we do see is we have companies that are more willing now to issue their local policies in the local currency. So for a long time, most policies were either done, most programs, I should say, so all the policies that allow it in either USD or euros, because that was the easiest thing for the risk manager of the corporate parent to deal with. But we're seeing now companies moving and saying if they have a local policy in Brazil, they want to have it in reais. That's what they want their local treasurer to have to pay their invoice in, so they don't have to worry about, well, when we bound this deal, it was this exchange rate to dollars, and now it's this one, so why do we have that change? So that's something that I'm seeing more of, and we tend to be flexible with allowing that where they want, and we can have a mix. You can have USD for countries that a risk manager chooses, and they can have local currencies for the other ones. So we do try to work with them on things like that.
And William, and you talked before about the local, the offices, and when you have don't have your office in another country, also your office in another country, right, you have to have a partner
Correct. Yes.
And how do you manage this to follow the rules of the main company? How it works? Because I think they have to follow the same structure, the same flow of to issue or some kind of like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so no, you're exactly right. We have what we call network partners because they help us expand our network. So we can issue policies in 150 plus countries and territories around the world. 26 of those are Swiss Re offices, so the majority are our partners. Now, most of the actual accounts use those Swiss Re offices because we try to have offices open where our customers need us. But you always are going to have companies that need coverage in some country where we don't have our own office. So we look in that country, try to look at who are the top 3 carriers for local business in that country, and then we'll reach out to them. We'll see who's interested in working with us, and we have a contract in place that has the KPIs that we expect our partners to adhere to as far as how they're treating our customers, what timeliness they issue invoices and policies, and we do a lot of work with the partners to hold them to those KPIs. And work with them to make sure that they're delivering the service the same as if it was an owned office. And when we run the numbers, we typically find that we're very close. You couldn't tell a difference if you hid the column that says who it is. You wouldn't tell a difference in the service level between those. And there's a lot of things I think that go into that. One is finding the right partner to begin with. So I said we tend to look for the top 3. We want somebody that's active in the local market, that knows the brokers, that knows the customers, that's doing a lot of their own business. One other thing that I think helps us a lot is the fact that the other side of our company at Swiss Re, the not Corso side, the Re side, we're probably been a long-time partner with most of these carriers. So if Swiss Re calls up and ask, would you like to partner with us? Would you like a chance to help us out? Most of the time we have a pretty enthusiastic yes from the companies that we're working with because of that relationship that we have. And beyond that, we can also go into things like training for those companies. Maybe they want to look at doing international within their region, or maybe they need training in a specific line of business. So that's something that we can build into the contract that we have with them to make sure that they're benefiting from the relationship that we have as well.
And sometimes here in Brazil, including we had here a conversation with the Patricia, and she said that the challenge is to build up a program for it.
Yeah.
And Brazilian companies doesn't have many options to do that, producing office being here. You are here.
Yes.
I'm believing that you can make that happen. So how is it? How is Brazilian market for you in this operation?
So I would say I'm excited about the prospects that we have, and yes, there are not that many options for customers in Brazil that are looking for international programs. But since December of last year, there's one more, and that's us. So we're very happy that we can now offer international programs for our 3 major lines of business, which are property, casualty, and D&O on the FinPro side. So we're actively in the marketplace, talking with customers, talking with brokers about what we can offer to them. What we see a lot of is looking at those customers that want to have an international program. Maybe they just want to have a South American program if they're a multi-Latina company, or if they just want to handle this region of their exposures on their own program. We also have a lot that are doing what I talked about kind of at the beginning, where they're buying their own individual policies. Maybe they've grown as a company. They started in Brazil and then they expanded and they have an office in Argentina or Uruguay or Colombia, wherever it might be. And nobody's even told them, you have the option of doing an international program. You don't have to buy standalone policies. So a lot of what I've been doing on my visits here since we started producing business in Brazil has been talking to brokers and customers about the options, just letting them know that they have the option to structure a program this way. And there are a few carriers in the marketplace that will offer this. And I think the more success that we see, the more we're going to see the interest from the customers and the brokers grow.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, William. And when you are underwriting or analyzing the global programs in other countries like South America, for example, Argentina or Chile or another country, do how you handle like the economic and political things in that countries? It's important to stay alert or to understand how is going on in these countries.
No, absolutely, and you guys are underwriters, so the job is to evaluate and understand the risk that you have. And when you're an international underwriter, you expand that by the number of countries in the world that you have to have some knowledge of what's going on. So you spend a lot of time looking at the news.
Yeah.
You have Google alerts set on your computer for the countries where your biggest exposures are. And as you're underwriting the risk, as you get a submission in from the broker and you're going through it, a big part of it is the technology that the carrier has to have to make sure the underwriter has the tools that they need at their disposal for modeling that risk when possible, or for understanding or flagging where you might have a country that has an increased risk for a certain hazard, no matter what line of business you're talking about. And I think that's a critical part, because that single underwriting aspect that I talked about earlier, I talked about the positives of it, but it can also be a negative. You have to know that the underwriter that's working on this risk has control of the risk that they're facing in all of these countries, and it can change quickly. So you have to make sure that you have an understanding of the coverage that you're providing and how it might work. And while an unforeseen circumstance by definition is not going to be able to be predicted, you have to think at least about the possibility of what might happen and how you're going to respond and how your policies are going to respond when something does.
Yeah, the world is changed so fast, so...
Yeah, no, exactly.
Are there many surprises during the year? For example, here in Brazil, this year, we had a law, a new law that changed a little bit the marine insurance. Mm-hmm. You face it a lot in other countries, etc.
We definitely do.
Really? I thought it's exclusive on Brazil.
I can tell you that even before I had Brazil under my responsibility, I had a lot of fun dealing with all the changes in Brazil. But you're not unique in the world in that there are a lot of countries that can change their rules, and it's something that you have to stay abreast of as an international carrier. In fact, we, along with probably most of our competitors in this space, have an entire team dedicated to monitoring changes in regulations around the world. So we have lawyers, we have international experts, we have policy language experts, that their job is to watch for changes that are happening, to monitor when SUSEP or the equivalent in another country issues a new regulation. What does this mean for us? How do we need to adapt? What do we need to tell our customers so that we make sure that we're still providing what we've promised to them? And what do we have to tell our underwriters, to your earlier question, so that they understand that the risk profile has shifted. And so we have to have some additional considerations in these countries. So yeah, there's always surprises. In a way, and I'm a little biased because of what I do, and I chose it, but it's kind of the fun of international too. It's not just the same old thing every time, and it's, we're coming up on November 1st, so that means I'm going to see these 5 renewals again. And we love all of our customers, but it's kind of fun to have the changes of what goes on in an international program to kind of keep you on your toes as an underwriter or a service person or whatever role you're fulfilling.
What about risk engineering? We talked a little bit about recommendation, but when you see a global program, I think you have to have people in these countries to do inspection or whatever, or you have to build a partner, to do the service. How it works for you in a global program? You do in the producing office with the risk manager, or you have to do in each country?
So typically it'll be a blend of both. It's almost like binding the risk transfer. You coordinate with the risk manager in the home country about what visits you want to do as the carrier, what visits they want to do as the risk manager to help them, and you set up your agenda for the year. We'll visit these sites, and this is what we'll do, and how much time we'll spend on them, and what the cost is going to be, and what our product will be for you, as far as reports and recommendations and maps and imaging, whatever it is that they need. And then you coordinate that with your risk engineering staff around the world. And we do have staff of risk engineering globally. It's one of our fastest growing areas, actually, because we've been growing so quickly in international programs. We've been adding engineers to be able to handle the inspection needs of our customers around the world as well. So you will have engineering expertise somewhere in the world where it's needed. For certain classes of business, the very tech-heavy ones or heavy manufacturing, you're going to have experts, whether it's in a country where that industry is common or whether there's good schooling or whatever it might be. So you might be sending an engineer from one part of the world to another if you need that expertise. But that's something that if you're going to be offering engineering services on these kind of programs, you need to understand and be willing to do. But you have to have some boots on the ground, the term for handling the engineering for whatever customer you have. The last part of that is you also have to keep track of the regulations. Not every country will allow you to send an engineer in from outside of the country, particularly if you don't have a local policy in place there. So if a customer asks you to send an engineer to, maybe it's a greenfield site or something, and we don't have a presence already there, a lot of times we can't send somebody in on the engineering side. So we need to have a policy in place because that establishes a contractual relationship between us and that country, and that allows us then to have service people.
Sometimes I have seen, for example, a company will start an operation in X country, and they send an engineer before the goods actually go, or the goods or the factory. For you, it's better this way, or start the operation, then you will go to see it?
But as an underwriter at heart, I love them sending it before they've started the operation because I want that engineer to look and tell me how is everything working before there's a problem. But working with that customer, making sure that we know what they're doing. Hopefully we're covering the E&C for them, so we're working with them side by side as they build their site. But the earlier we can have the information, the better.
For me, it's like, I totally agree with you, because if there is something to correct, you correct before you start. So
yes, it's a lot easier to do then.
It's empty, it's no operation, so it's
absolutely yes.
And William, and about the brokers, I imagine to start a good global program, insurance global program, you have to work with a broker who have a knowledge about this.
Yes.
And how do you see in South America, for example, about we have a good brokers which works with global insurance programs? How can you see?
Yeah, I see that there's a lot of expertise in the Latin American market from the brokerage side. Certainly globally, most international programs are with the international brokerage houses, but not all of them are. We probably see 80 to 90% of accounts come through the global brokerage houses. But that list is expanding even. For years it was 3 of them. Now I'd say we could probably say 5 or 6 maybe would count in that global broker space, where they have operations around the world, they have expertise, they have dedicated teams to this international program business. And we also see quite a bit, and maybe I'd say in Latin America specifically, some smaller brokers that, because they have such strong relationships with their customers, they hang on to those customers as they grow. And there are ways for smaller brokers that don't have their own operations outside of their home country to be able to service those accounts. So in LATAM, there's several good broker networks where smaller brokers from the different countries, they band together in a conference, and they meet with each other, and they have agreements that if you have a risk that needs placement assistance in my country, I'll help you, and then they do the same thing.
Yeah, good.
So it's a great way for those smaller brokers that don't have, and in a lot of cases don't want to have a footprint outside their home country, to grow with their customers as they go and keep those relationships intact.
And also is a way to protect themselves in a competition.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. If you can't service your customers' needs, you're going to lose it very quickly to one of those top tier global brokers.
Yeah.
About this kind of like a pool or not, and there is a co-insurance in global programs or not?
So it depends a little bit on line of business. What we see most often in casualty and the FinPro lines is companies that buy international programs, they just buy their primary layer. Maybe first excess they'll buy as well. Most places around the world, it's single carrier business. So if you have a casualty program, you have your primary casualty carrier, they'll do your international program, and it's all them. 100% of the risk goes to them. In the property space, it's very common to have a reinsurance panel backing that program, because it's needed to provide the capacity that we talked about at the outset. Yeah. There aren't many carriers that are going to provide 100% of coverage for most of the customers in the space that we operate in. So we have a reinsurance panel behind us, and that's another benefit of the international program. So we talked about the customer being able to just negotiate once, and that works if you have a single carrier. But if you have 10 carriers that are needed to get your capacity, you don't want to have 10 times however many countries you're in. If you're in 10 countries and you have 10 carriers providing your coverage, you don't want to be dealing with 100 policies. So the risk manager will choose one of those carriers, typically the one with the largest share or the best international platform, to be the fronting carrier. That carrier will issue a policy for 100% of the risk in the foreign countries, and then have reinsurance from those other 9 carriers in that example to handle it. So it makes it a little easier for the customer. They only have to deal with one policy in the country, and it makes it a smoother transaction for everybody. You don't have all 10 carriers, many of which probably couldn't do it if they had to, issuing policies. So that's a big part of the role of an international programs carrier, is being able to manage that type of a panel behind us.
And financially speaking, for the insurer, sometimes we have, for example, how is the numbers in Brazil? There is this panel of number, but people are saying that the problem is if global problem or it's local program. Yeah. So you face that discussion a lot, people in their country. No, it's not me, you, in this kind of thing.
You certainly hear that a lot. Yes. Anytime something goes wrong, you have the pointing game of whose fault it is. It's actually one thing that I like about global programs, though, because we can look at the world in its entirety and say, this is where the loss occurred, this is where the slowdown, whatever the issue is, we can talk about what it is. And a big part of what we try to do at Corso is build transparency into the service that we're providing. So we'll show customers through a portal that we have, they can see exactly the status of their program at any time. So it's called Pulse. So they log into the Pulse portal. They can see, has my policy been issued here? Has my invoice been issued? And if not, what stage is it in? And who do I need to call to get this resolved? So that takes out a lot of the blame game that people play. And then I think you have to look at it, again, holistically from a risk standpoint, as far as, where a loss happened. Was it because it was a global program, or was it a foreign loss, or it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You're underwriting the risk worldwide. You need to have an understanding of what that means. A risk doesn't become better or worse simply because it's international or because it's an international program for a certain carrier. You have to evaluate a risk based on its own characteristics. And there can be good locations and good risks in any country of the world, and bad locations and bad risks in any country of the world.
And things happen, right?
Exactly.
In a situation like that, for example, you have a renewing, and you see that let's say the losses come from a specific country. In the renewing, the negotiation with the risk manager, it's like you decide if you want to pay here or you want to, because sometimes the company, no, who will pay is the company, my subsidiary in Brazil, let's say.
Right. Yep.
It's like that, the negotiation, or you say how it is,
So typically in that scenario, what I'd look to do is probably have a specific deductible for the country or the exposure that's having the problem. Probably spend a little bit more time on the engineering services for that location to try to have those risks improved where we could. But that's what I would rather do. You see sometimes companies are going to be forced into having a higher deductible because they've got a single location or a single country that has a problem, and carriers won't provide capacity at a price that the customer wants to pay. Rather than doing that across the board, I'd much rather have a specific deductible by that difficult location and then look for a way to work with the customer on it.
I think that the local people will try to bring more money, more premium.
Maybe,
But in the end of the day, it's a global program that need to be
exactly, and the allocation of that premium, that's dictated for the most part by the producing country. So the producing country, they set the overall premium for what the program is going to cost, and then we'll work with the customer on how we're going to allocate that by country. But it has to be done in a fair way. We can't provide the same coverage for half the price in another country. So sort of the international program buzzwords are fair and reasonable premium allocation. And when I was running underwriting teams, I told my underwriters, if we're audited by the country, by the insurance regulators in the country, are you going to be comfortable standing in front of an audit committee justifying the way you allocated this premium? Or the newspaper test. If the daily newspaper of your city has your name and what you did, are you going to be comfortable that you're going to be able to support the way that you set this premium up? So you can't allow any local country or the master country to dominate the premium allocation.
Yeah, and you said something, and probably we will spend more time in the engineering side in that country that had problem. And sometimes I've worked for different insurance companies, but I already saw situation like, the risk engineer can see that, but who is paying these hours, his hours or here? So, man, it's all the same company, I understand, financially is important to everything happen, but in the end of the day, it's not the same pocket,
Yes, no, exactly. And I talked to when I was describing what my role is making sure that all the different organizations and units within Corso that have to come together to service these customers, you get some of that. I think you get that at every company, but at the end of the day, it's a risk that the company takes on, and that you have to work together and you have to work. That kind of a case, I would expect we're working with the customer as well, because most of the time in these corporate accounts, the customer's paying us a fee to do this engineering. Smaller side of accounts, maybe it's included in the premium sometimes, but for the bigger ones, we're getting a fee. The customer's paying for that, and how we allocate that and how we allocate the time spent on different locations or different countries, that's something that it shouldn't impact the customer for sure. They're paying for quality service globally. That's what they're buying from us, and that's what I expect to deliver to them.
And how will you guarantee the same service for the client? It's maybe we are talking about different cultures, different people. How the technology can be help these kind of things, or data analytics, for example.
It's really about staying on top of it, of making sure that we know at all times what stage we're at with our programs. So we have an outstanding operations team at Corso whose responsibility is to keep track of all of these programs. Where are we? What have we done? What needs to be done next? And when do we need to follow up? We have escalation protocols that are in place where something's not going to sit for more than 48 hours without a response somewhere. And it's just something that you have to stay on top of internally, and you really have to work with your customer and your broker as well. So I talk a lot about the tripartite relationship. So there's three parties to any international program, any insurance contract in general. Your carrier, your customer, and your broker. They all have to be talking. We have to make sure that everybody is being transparent. Nobody's trying to hide. Nobody's trying to play the blame game with the finger pointing. That we just say, here's what we're trying to solve. This is what we need to do it. Let's get it done. And bringing the transparency to the process with the Pulse portal that I talked about earlier, I recommend, certainly on the larger accounts that we bind, to my teams, that the day after binding and the weeks after binding, they set up at least one time a week where they meet the account team, the broker, and the customer to go through exactly where we are in the process, who needs to do what, are we on track to provide the service that we've promised to them, and if not, what do we have to do to fix it? So you have to be brutally honest with yourself and with your brokers and your carriers. You can't try to hide things, and you can't allow people to dodge the responsibility. You have to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be.
And Rodrigo asked you about coinsurance. And sometimes what I've seen is the captive of the insurer, the insured, using the insurer to like operationalize the insurance.
To do the
How does it work? First of all, if you can explain for the people, what is a captive, how does it work?
Yeah, so in the simplest terms, a captive is an insurance company that is created and owned by the insured. So one of our customers will decide that they want to take a portion of their own risk, because in most normal cases, insurance companies can only deal with other insurance companies or reinsurance companies. We have to have that in place in order to transfer risk and premium to our customer. So customers will put a captive in place. They'll create this insurance company within the body of their own company. There's other routes to get to it, but that's the simplest one for an explanation. Mm-hmm. And that allows them to take a piece of their own risk. And we were talking about your deductible example earlier was a perfect example of where I would expect we might see a captive come into play, because that company doesn't want to take a huge deductible across their entire portfolio, but maybe they'll accept a large deductible on that one location with problems. What they can do, though, is keep the deductible the same, but say that they're going to put their captive in to take that first layer. And a lot of times, particularly in the property space, we see captive acting as a primary layer insurer. So if the market will support, just making up numbers, $1 million deductible, and the customer's happy to pay that, but they feel like they have a strong risk, they're not going to have losses, they have faith in their own risk management practices, maybe they'll let their captive take up to $10 million. So they essentially have a $10 million deductible. They can put that out in the marketplace, get a much better rate from the carriers, and take their own risk into their own company. Now their captive gets paid. They'll work with the fronting carrier on evaluating what type of premium can flow into the captive. There's certain financial tests that have to pass to make sure the transaction's legal. Mm-hmm. But it gives a way for the company to take some of their own risk, maybe make a little bit of money on the premium side, and as they get into it, they can use their captive for a lot more strategic aspects of their business. And it's something that we see pretty prevalent in the international program space. It's something that I've spent a lot of time working with captives and different ways of utilizing them, going beyond just that primary layer and having them actually play as a participant in the panel, doing different things where maybe we start to share some of the risk after a first or second loss event. There's a lot of exciting things that the companies with more open minds can do with captives that are going to help them in their overall approach. And honestly, it's something that I see starting to become more of a trend in Latin America, where some of the major captive servicing companies are starting to open offices here, starting to talk with some of the larger companies about the benefits of captives, and I think we're going to see that as carriers as well. We're going to see it becoming more and more of a thing for Brazil and across Latin America.
Do you think it's a tendency to the future? Yeah. The companies are like that to do a captive, or?
I think that we're definitely going to be seeing more. Certainly for Latin America, it's going to be the larger companies that lead the way, because captives, they do require some administration, they require some capital to start them up. So they typically are only going to make sense at a higher level. That's where you can get into sometimes some of the brokers. Some carriers have captive facilities that they can offer to customers. We have a product that we call a virtual captive that allows a customer to have sort of the same impact as a captive might have, but without going through the startup costs, where it's a direct relationship between us and the carrier themselves. So there's a lot of things that can be done. And I think as we see the insurance market here in Brazil and across Latin America continue to expand and continue to internationalize, we're going to see that as another aspect that customers are considering to fulfill their risk management objectives they have.
If I understood well, maybe the advantage of which is the options that the insured have, because when I say, when I first heard about captive, my first question is why. What is it differ from it's not easier to do a deductible and keep the money in their pocket instead, pay and take it back?
So it depends on the customer and what their goals are. Sometimes you can get into a space with a captive where you're essentially trading dollars is the term that's used, where any money that they get in, they're paying right back out in claims. Maybe they've got reasons that makes sense to them. If it does, then happy to facilitate that structure for them. But most of the time we see companies establish a captive where they're confident that they're not going to have a loss outside of a true shock loss. They don't use it as a working layer. They use it as, we're confident, we have the protection in place, we don't think we're going to have a loss in this layer. This allows me to save money on my premium because the traditional carriers are now pricing my risk at a higher deductible level, and also receive premium into their captive for that layer. And if they don't have a loss, that's their premium. They can do what they want with that. They can dividend it back to the parent company. They can invest it. They can use it to complete recommendations, whatever it is that they is going to help them with their ultimate goals. But usually what we see is captives working in that way.
And generally speaking, they have to apply same rules as an insurance company, right? About legislation and etc.
They do. So most captives don't have to go through full licensing processes. There's different requirements for the different key domiciles for captives around the world, but typically the requirements are less than for a traditional carrier because the premium volumes are less, the capital intensity is a little bit less, and they're most of the time only authorized to write business for their parent company. There's very few captives that go for a license to write third-party business. When they do that, there is more regulation that comes into play, but there are regulations they have to follow. They are an insurance company, so they have to follow the regulations of insurance carriers, but it all depends on where they're domiciled. And that's why you see the same places come up again and again. There are areas that have strong laws around how captives are regulated, but they're friendly to the captive formation, whether it's the amount of capital they require for startup, the meeting schedules, whatever it is, it's something that makes it easier for companies to operate captives in that country or state in the U.S. So you'll see the same places, Bermuda, Vermont, some of the Channel Islands outside of England, some of the Caribbean islands. Those are the key domiciles around the world for captives, and they are that because of the way that they've set up their regulations.
Good, William. And about the experience in the global programs, like which kind of line of business is more easier to put or to close the deal, in your opinion? And there are combined line of business together to close all products together, or there isn't. You have to see separately each.
So most of the time for international programs, you're going to have it separated by line of business. To do what I would call a package program internationally is very difficult because most of the time the regulations are too different in the various countries to allow that to be done. And most, again, going back to the space that we operate in and that most international programs are in, the large corporates, they typically want to buy their coverage independently anyways, to where they have a coverage for each different line of business, probably with a different inception date, maybe with a different broker, maybe with a different carrier. So there's a lot less incentive for the large corporate space to buy combined programs. So we see most of them we see all of them purchased individually. As far as the easiest, there's none of them are easy, but I would say you look at the characteristics of what the program looks like. So we talked about the reinsurance panels. If you add that adds to the complexity, the number of countries that are involved, the limits that are being asked for, the deductible level. Is there going to be a lot of claims activity that the fronting carrier is going to have to work with? All of those things come into play for how easy or not easy it is to close the deal and then to service the deal after the fact. So overall, we talked a little earlier, the casualty, the FinPro lines that are typically single carrier, those are usually more straightforward to structure and put together, but you still got to do the underwriting. You still have to have the best offer on the table and show the customer how you're going to provide the service to them. There's maybe more moving parts on the property side because the broker and the fronting carrier not only have to deal with what they're doing, but in a lot of cases they have to deal with what 10, 20, 40 other carriers are doing to provide the overall capacity that's needed for the program.
And they, you talked before about the reinsurance in how they see with the capacity limit. There's a lot of capacity and appetite for this kind of the global programs.
Yeah, there absolutely is a lot of appetite for it in the marketplace, and that's something that we so Corso and the other carriers that do these international programs, it's providing a service to a lot of those carriers that otherwise couldn't participate on these programs. If they only have operations in 1 or 2 or even 5 countries, they're not going to participate on a program that has 20 local policy needs. They won't have the licensing, they won't have the ability, but acting as a reinsurer of Corso or another fronting carrier, that allows them to expand the universe of opportunities they have to write to any company around the world, because they can act as a reinsurer from their home country, but not have to deal with all the administration of having those policies issued around the world and moving the money and handling the claims and everything that goes with that. So that's one of the benefits that the fronting carriers in the marketplace bring to the overall industry.
In your experience, you would say that the global program market is growing? You see more companies coming to a global program or leaving the global program?
I definitely see more coming to global programs, and it's really for 2 reasons. So I talked about how a lot of the time that I spend in our LATAM markets is talking about just making sure people know it's an option. They're already international. Maybe they're buying standalone. Maybe they're doing something else for their coverage, and turning that into an international program is definitely a growth engine for us and something that we're seeing success in. But the other thing that we see is just companies growing, expanding for the first time. And as the world gets a little bit smaller, it seems, every year, as supply chains globalize, as companies are looking for customers or markets outside of their home country, they're having needs for insurance that they never had before. So we're seeing companies grow, and companies that 10 years ago were, you say, too small. They can be a huge company and stay within their home country, but you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company anymore to have international insurance needs. And that's something that's growing more and more. And maybe 5 years ago it was the top 2,000 companies in the world would have international needs. It's probably more like now the top 5,000 companies have these needs. So carriers that are ready and there and willing to do the work to take advantage of that market, there's definitely going to be some growth there.
And how does it work for you when, for example, I don't know if it happens a lot, but for some reason a specific country goes out of the program? It has to be negotiated the whole program again, or you just take out these and let's see what happens?
So typically that's only going to happen at renewal, depending on the circumstances. I mean, if it's a purchase or a sale, then it could happen midterm. Then what you would do is you negotiate just for that country. So whether the country's coming or going, you underwrite the risk, you determine what the premium will be, you can add the country midterm and charge the premium for it. And the exact same in reverse if a country is sold from a program. Most of the time when it's not a purchase or a sale, and maybe the company for a variety of reasons has decided that they don't want one country in their program anymore, they're going to buy something standalone, they'll do that at the renewal. It's much less intensive work for the customer, the broker, and the carrier to do it that way. So unless there's a driving reason to have that done, it's going to be at the renewal date, and that allows the underwriters on the risk to just price the risk that the customer wants for that policy term.
What about cross-selling in global programs? You said property, financial line, and
casualty for us. Yes.
You have maybe the marine guy. Does it happen?
It absolutely does. Yeah. And what we see a lot of is looking for what in our world would be domestic policies. So we're issuing an international program for this company, and it's coming out of Brazil, and they need a local policy to be issued in Taiwan. And the underwriter in Taiwan does their job for that line of business. But then, the marine underwriter says, I know this company is shipping things every week in and out of here. Can I talk to the broker about maybe looking at that? And because of the relationship that you build with the brokers and the customers through being the international program carrier, you can usually at least get a conversation about that. So that's definitely something that comes into play. And it's something we talked about our network earlier. That's something that our network partners can do as well. So they're doing a service for us and for the customer. That's an introduction to the customer in their country for property or casualty or whatever. But if that customer has a need for another line of business just domestically, then probably our partner is going to have the first meeting to talk about the needs for that. So it's definitely an opportunity and something that we think is another strength of the international program portfolio is what you can build off of that.
It's a challenge now because the underwriter of the international program has to understand, I don't know, all line of business or not. Just you have a division inside of the area.
We do have divisions by line of business.
Okay.
So we wouldn't expect an underwriter to be an expert in anything other than their own line.
Big brain.
Yeah, exactly. What I ask underwriters to do is to know enough to know where to send the customer or broker when they get a question about a line of business that isn't theirs. So we expect them to be experts in their line of business, to have a feel for how the exposure works around the world for their line of business. And if they're a property underwriter and a broker calls and says, we've got a casualty need, we can do this, I just want the underwriter to be able to say, okay, yes, we do that. Here's the person you need to talk to. They don't need to be the expert themselves. We ask enough of them. We don't need to do that.
Yeah, maybe because of the cross-sell, I thought maybe, you have to understand all the line of business, but no,
it's just making the connection.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about the future? Do you see any changes or any new challenges or coverage?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be challenges. One is we talked earlier. I think this market's going to grow, and that's going to put a strain on all of us carriers that do this. So one big challenge that I think we all have to think about is finding the right people. It takes a certain kind of person to want to do this international program business and to do it well. So you've got to have a real passion for the business. Mm-hmm. You have to be somebody that's going to do that follow-up that I talked about. And the job doesn't end on the inception date of an international program. It really just starts at that point because there's so much follow-up that has to be done. So I think getting the right people in, getting them trained, and having them know what needs to be done, that's going to be an issue as this space continues to grow. And then I think you just have to always be looking out for what's next. What types of coverage, what needs are customers going to come up with, what's going to happen around the world that people aren't anticipating. I think maybe the next big thing that we'll see is in the money movement. That's probably the biggest point of frustration for most customers and reinsurers on these programs is it can sometimes be 5 or 6 months before a reinsurer is paid for a deal that they've bound. We don't like that as a fronting carrier. We don't like it when we're the reinsurer. So trying to find ways to speed that up. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the company or companies that figure that out first and how to make sure that's moving and really eliminating all of the unnecessary delays in that.
And when you say about, for example, getting the right people, sometimes what I saw is, for example, for that country specifically, they have just people to issue policies and not underwriters to help with doubts and etc. And in other company, I have seen the team of underwriting dealing with the business because sometimes they have doubts, they have needs and etc. How do you see is the best way? How do you do that?
Yeah. So my preference there is to have an underwriter in the local country. There's a balance that we have to look at. I don't want the account re-underwritten in the country. The account's underwritten once. The terms and conditions are agreed. You have to have a local underwriter by regulation because you have a different carrier, a different paper that's accepting that risk. And for most companies, underwriters only have authority for the country where they are employed. They don't have global authority. So you do have to officially have an underwriter to review and accept that risk on behalf of the company. But beyond that, I think and you alluded to it in your question, I want to have somebody there that understands the risk, that can have a conversation with a broker or a customer if they need to, because that's part of the service that we're providing. There have been in the past companies that set up their international business as I say it's two guys, a desk, and a stamp, and they get a policy in, they stamp it, and they send it off, and that's it. That's not the approach that I like as an underwriter. That's not the approach that we take as Corso. We want to have underwriters in place that know the risk. They're not re-underwriting it, but they can have a knowledgeable conversation with our customers in that country if they need it, because that, as I see it, that's something that they're buying from us when they come to Corso for their international program.
Good.
Yeah. And William, about there are concern about the climate change, and because a lot of countries. So, what's your opinion about this?
I mean, I think it's absolutely something that is certainly changing the risk landscape. That any insurance company needs to at least be aware of how it's impacting their book, their portfolio, and their customers. Every company is going to do what they feel is best. It's something that at Swiss Re is very important to us as far as trying to reduce our carbon footprint, of working with companies that are taking steps in the direction towards carbon reduction and towards more environmentally friendly practices. And I think that's an important thing for companies to be doing. But from a risk standpoint, making sure that we have an understanding of, are storms getting worse? Are they moving in different areas? Are we seeing hail where we never have before? Yeah. That's something that has to be seen. And we talked earlier about underwriters having knowledge of what's going on around the world. These days, it can be even having knowledge of what's going on in their own country, because just talking about the natural catastrophe hazards, they're changing from when I started underwriting 20-some years ago. Yeah. You're seeing different risks in different parts of my home country, the States, that you wouldn't have thought about before. But now you have to say, well, that there is a possibility that this location might have a tornado, or whatever it is. And the same thing, I think, is happening around the world. So you have to be working with your customers to understand where their exposures are now and where their exposures are going to be in the future. So as companies look to expand, they look to grow, it's something that I'd like to see insurance companies partner with the companies as they grow. It's something that we do. We have a program called RDS that we offer to our customers that gives them a visualization of the risk profile from a NatCat perspective of locations that don't exist yet. So they can virtually see this is what could happen with different climate change scenarios over the next 5, 10, 50 years. So those type of things I think are interesting, and they're something that the insurance industry can bring to our customers to help mitigate the risks, and not just write the check when the claim happens. That's important. Yep. But what can we do to help customers avoid risks and make smarter decisions with their risk profile?
William, thank you very much. I really appreciate this conversation.
It was amazing. Thank you for the about your
I hope you have enjoyed
conversation, your talk. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I appreciate it, guys.
Sorry about our English, but
not at all. Not at all. You should hear my Portuguese. You're very good.
And if you have anything to add, feel free.
Yeah, no, I just again appreciate the conversation. I think this is what I'm trying to do, what Corso is trying to do here in Brazil and in Latin America is talk about international programs, talk about the insurance market in general. So I think it's great what you guys have here. I'm very appreciative of the invite, and best of luck with this as it goes on in the future. I look forward to seeing you maybe the next time I'm here.
Thank you, William.
You are more than invited to come back.
I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Pessoal, dando nossos recados finais, não deixe de deixar aquele like maroto lá no nosso canal do YouTube.
Pede o like em inglês também.
Just click on the like button on YouTube and subscribe. It's very important. I don't know how can I say this in English, but...
Pessoal, clica no like, curta, compartilha, manda no WhatsApp aí, critica nosso inglês, não tem problema, dá engajamento.
Engajamento lá, escreve no chat lá, ó, papapá. E não esquecer, pessoal, se vocês têm mais alguém que vocês gostariam de indicar pra gente poder trazer aqui, bater esse papo.
Inclusive, pessoal, você que é de outra seguradora, tá recebendo alguém, quer... Só falar com a gente, pessoal. A gente tá livre aí pra conversar.
A gente corre o campo.
Outra coisa, InsurCast, projeto pessoal meu e do Rodrigo. Nada que falamos aqui tem a ver com as empresas que a gente trabalha ou que eventualmente já trabalhamos.
É isso aí. Thank you again, William.
Thank you.
And
see you.
All right.
Yeah, bye.